us. Very good. So I just got back late Wednesday from traveling in Denmark and primarily Germany through Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Romania, and Transylvania, of course, which is part of Romania. I wore a scarf the whole time, so no. I think that traveling to foreign countries is a transformative journey for me. And as I was preparing to leave, I had just done a Sunday service, and then we did Matt and Becky's wedding, which was huge. So when I left, I wasn't operating on all cylinders. And of course, those of you who know when you fly to Europe, it's a good, 13 hours, whatever, on the plane, 15 hours. So when I got off the plane, I had directions because I was staying in an Airbnb, and the woman said, all you have to do is go down to a kiosk by baggage claim, buy a ticket to Christianshavn stop, step outside, get on the train, all the stops go to Christianshavn. Easy. So I get there, I get my ticket, I get on the train. Relax, finally. So I'm noticing that it's kind of rural, as I'm traveling along. And I'm thinking, well, this is kind of weird. You think that Copenhagen would be showing up by now, and it didn't. And the stops were far between. And a conductor came on, and I said, I need to go to Christianshavn. And of course, it's actually pronounced sort of like Christian Hound or something. And she said, no, you want to go to Kristelstedt. I said, no, I want to go to Christianshavn. She said, no, you want to go to Kristelstedt. You got like 3 more stops. So 2 hours later, I'm still on the train. And I'm thinking, why would they build an airport so far away from the city? So I Googled how far is the airport, and it was like 15 minutes. And I'm like, I guess I'm on the wrong train. So I got off, and I'm at some train station. I don't know where I am, and there's nobody that works there. And there's a guy with sweeping up, and I said, I need to get to Copenhagen, but I don't know where the train is. And so he found somebody to assist me, and she said, the train will be here in 10 minutes. Just get on this train. It'll take you to Copenhagen. I'm like, great. So I thought, I have 10 minutes. I'm going to buy a bottle of water because there was a little convenience store in the train station. So I got my water, and I walk up to pay it, and I pull out my Danish krone, and I hand it to the guy, and he goes, we don't take Danish krone. I said, why? He goes, because you're in Sweden. So I started off, which should have been a 15-minute ride. It ended up being 4 hours by the time I got back to Copenhagen and found my place. Yeah. That's the thing about traveling, right? You don't know where you are, you can't read the signs, you don't know what's going on, particularly me. But anyway, so once I got settled, I got there a day early, and my kids joined me the next day. And we traveled across Denmark to a little medieval town called Ribe, which is where my ancestors are from. And my family emigrated to the United States in the mid-1800s because the living conditions were so bad. There was no, they were foster kids, there was no food, there was no work, there was no hope for them. So they emigrated to the US in search of a better life. And then today I look at Denmark, and I'm amazed how the living conditions are amazing. And I wonder, how did it transform to being this place where people wanted to get out of there to being one of the happiest places on the planet? So here are some of the things that I discovered about Denmark. And, I'm going to give you a list of things. So, just stay with me. And part of it is from reading, but also we took a tour with a guy who was dressed as Hans Christian Andersen, and he was from New Jersey, but he was married to a Danish woman, and he'd lived there for 20 years. Anyway, so here's some of the things that have been transformed about Denmark, and one is that education is free, including higher education, and and advanced degrees. And not only is it free, but you get paid to go to school. You get 1,000, I don't know if it's kroner or dollars, but you get 1,000 a month to go to school if you live on your own, and you get 500 if you live with your parents. Pretty good, huh? Women get 9 months off for maternity leave. Men get a few months off as well. There's free health care. The minimum wage is $20 an hour, 6 weeks vacation a year, And most work days end at 5 o'clock because although they work hard when they're at work, most Danes are done by 5 o'clock. And what they value is spending time with their family and friends. That's what's important to them, more so than work. They take care of their senior citizens so they don't have to suffer from financial terror. I like that word, financial terror. 45% of the trips to work are done on a bicycle, and 75% of them ride in the winter. Because of jet lag, I'd be up like at 4 or 5 in the morning, and I was sitting on the balcony outside of our little apartment, and I would just watch people in the morning get up and grab their bikes, and off they would go to work. And their bike paths, I'm noticing that Seattle is starting to be very similar to Copenhagen, where there's a separate lane, and they have separate bridges for them, and of course they're healthy because they're all riding their bikes, every single day. Their goal is to be carbon neutral by 2025. And less than 1% of their garbage goes into landfill. They have this process of burning it, and they have gotten so good at it that apparently the UK is now sending their garbage over to them to get rid of. Not only that, but they're building this new facility. It's a replacement for the power plant, and I'll have to read it because it's a replacement that will run on fossil fuel-free biomass. Not sure what that is, when it opens in 2020. Now, besides it being a power plant, it's going to double as a ski slope. So you can see it outside of town. There's this big thing that they're building, and it's got a slanted roof. And they're like, well, we don't have mountains in Denmark, and people like to ski. So now they can go to the power plant, and there's going to be artificial snow, and they can ski down the power plant. It's like, wow, okay, so that's pretty cool. They have recently taken in 1 million refugees. And then the question is it perfect? No, no place is perfect. I noticed a lot of drinking, some serious drinking going on there, as well as smoking. The taxes are really high. Taxes on a car are 160%. It would make you think twice about buying a car, wouldn't it? But it summed up for me is when we went to the Tivoli Gardens, which is the amusement park, and they had a ride that was these swings that I don't know if it was like 5 stories in the air or something. It's way high. And basically you're on this little swing and you're spinning around up there. So the kids are like, come on, Mom, you have to go on this. Of course, as soon as we got on it, lightning started. So they shut down the ride. And we went back later. But before we got on, they stopped us and they said, you need to take out your keys, your wallet, your purse, your passport, your phone, and put it in this little cubby over here. And we're like, what? And they have this open cubby that's open to everybody. It's in this little plastic thing. You can get stuff from both sides. And at first we're like, wait a minute. And they're like, you can't go up there with anything in your pocket because if you lose it, you could kill somebody while you're up there, not to mention you'd never get it back, probably. So we are like, wow, so if I want to ride this ride, I have to give up my money, my passport, my keys, everything that I have, and just leave it there. And of course, they even searched us before we got on to make sure. But we did, and we went on the ride, and it was very windy up there. And when I came back, there was all our stuff. And the kids and I were just astounded. We were like, can you imagine, like, putting your purse in a cubby and walking away on a ride and having your stuff still there when you come back? And that, again, that sort of summed up for me the culture that seems to exist there. There's a culture of sort of trusting and honesty that's there. So I was wondering, how is it that Denmark transformed itself from a country that my ancestors had to leave in the mid-1800s in order to keep from starving to one of the happiest places on the planet? Well, the song that we sang, right? You are the voice, you are the heart, you are the hands, and you are the voice of spirit on earth. And every once in a while, someone appears who is that. We have our own people in our own country who do that. We've had Gandhi, and in Norway there was a man by the name of Nikolai Grundtvig. And he was a Danish minister. He was an author, a poet, a philosopher, a historian, a teacher, and a politician. He was really into Norse myths, but he also was into Lutheranism. And he looked around and he just thought, why are we not embracing the ideas that we are, that Christianity is talking about, which is taking care of one another and love and compassion. And so he got kicked out of the church for about 7 years. And then he started preaching on his own, and the king and the queen would come to see him. And he ended up influencing the Danish national consciousness. He believed that rather than educating learned scholars, that the university should educate everyone for active participation in society and in life. And he promoted values such as wisdom, compassion, equality. And he believed that the purpose of life is to have fun. It was interesting because one of the things I heard is that the Danes like to have fun. Like if they're not having fun, it's like, what is the point in doing anything? And that there's this inherent belief in creativity and free will and fun, and that he said, therefore, a spirit of freedom, cooperation, and discovery is to be kindled in individuals, in science, and in society as a whole. So what's interesting to me is, so why did that take root, right? Why did that take root? Because this is not a new message. We hear it in different forms. And I've heard there is an analogy of, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and there are different kinds of students, and it can be compared to wood. And so if a student is not ready, it's like taking a spark and trying to light wet wood. It just doesn't go anywhere. But when the student is ready, a spark it hits dry wood and kindling, and it just takes off. And it seems like the Danish people, for whatever reason, were ready for that spark to ignite them and to transform their society in less than 200 years, right? So he truly was the voice of spirit on earth. So after leaving Denmark, Caroline flew back to the States, and Jordan and I went to Berlin. And here we saw the influence of Hitler. And instead of seeing the ripples of love and compassion that were part of the society and the culture in Denmark, what we see in Berlin are the ripples of hate, of separatism, and of racism. Now, the thing that I appreciate about the German people is that they're not hiding from their past, right? I mean, they have fully embraced their past and the whole Holocaust. They're not denying it, they're not hiding it, they have totally owned it. And one of the ways that they have done this is they have asked the question a few years ago, like, we need to do a memorial, but what should the memorial be? And they really struggled with how to make a memorial and what it should look like. And they finally hired an architect from the US, and it's in the center of town. It's actually close to the Berlin Wall. And it's an experiential memorial. So there's no sign, there's no names, there's no instructions, there's nothing. And it's probably as big as this room, maybe a little bigger. But basically, it's a bunch of blocks, just black blocks. And they're all different sizes. And as you walk through, the floor is tilted, the ground is tilted, so it's just slightly off. And you're encouraged to just walk through it and just experience what you experience. And what happens is, as you're walking through it, the blocks are going this way and this way, so people will walk right in front of you and then disappear, and then they'll walk in front of you and disappear. And you find yourself, all of a sudden, you're in a deep hole, and then maybe you come out of the hole. And the whole thing is discombobulating, to say the least. And I think what it did, for me anyway, was to give a perception of what it was like probably to live during that period of time, but also for the people who were persecuted, is just this whole, like, everything is off, right? You're just sort of off center, and you don't know, and you see people and then they're gone, and it's this constant movement. So from there we went to the concentration camp that's outside of Berlin, to Sachsenhausen. Sachsenhausen. And it is the first concentration camp, and it was the template for the rest of them. So they started it in the 30s, and it's where they did they tried out all their stuff that they were doing. And it truly, I mean, I have read for years, like, as many autobiographies and accounts of the Holocaust that I can, so I have it inside my head, but then to see it out there in person was definitely sobering. And the horrors, you know, again, it's like the ripples of love or the ripples of hate and separatism that existed is just insane. And I appreciate the Germans for not getting rid of it, for keeping it there so that people can see. And I think everybody should go and experience it. I think high school should go and see it and be educated on it, by it. The average age of the guards was 20 years old. And when you think about the mindset that they were raised in, probably from the time they were little, you know, they were taught, you know, Jews are bad and this is bad. And so by the time they're 20, they're stepping right into that. So it's interesting to me to see the different areas that people, the different directions that different countries have gone on. It was also interesting being in Eastern countries, in the former communist countries, and seeing how they live. But, so we have ripples of love. We have ripples of hate and separation. They're constantly going on, are they not? And we saw it play out yesterday in Charlottesville, Virginia. The white supremacists were marching because the city took a statue of Robert E. Lee down. And so they decided to march, and they carried torches, which were sort of echoing the idea of the KKK and the torches. I mean, that seemed like that was part of the intent. And of course, there were counter marches going on, and they clashed, and, you know, it was ugly. And of course, then you know that a guy drove a car into the crowd and killed one woman and injured 19, just as the group, this is the counter group, and it was like they were in this high moment because they were chanting, our streets, our streets, our streets. So they had reclaimed their city, their campus, their streets, and they were chanting, our streets, our streets. And you just feel that they really were owning that, and then poof, the car came through. And how old was the driver? The driver was 20. Now, I don't believe that he was raised to be a racist. Maybe he was, but his mother was interviewed, probably not. But we don't need to be raised that way anymore because of YouTube and the news. You can choose what it is you wish to see and wish to know. And I ask, and we ask probably, how is it that this has come back again? Right? I mean, didn't we do this already? Didn't we do this back in the 60s? Hadn't we healed this? And apparently we haven't. And so we're seeing the exposure of racism, of hate and separation again, and wounds that we thought were healed, that were well on their way to being healed, aren't. And so they're exposed again, and perhaps they're being exposed again for them to be healed once and for all. And so a question that I raise with all of us today is, how can you be an ambassador to heal this once and for all, and so that this does not rear its head again in another 40 years? You know, when we think, oh yeah, we got it, we're done, we've completed that, boom, 40 years later, it has shown up again. This is the call for transformation. This is the call for good in our lives and in the world. And we always have ripples of kindness and compassion or separation and hate. We just always do. And we can even look at it on a personal level with your community and with your family, and maybe ask ourselves, what is my influence with my family, with my community? Am I a positive force of transformation, or do I kind of, you know, not stir things up, but look for the negative or not be harmonious? I was in Transylvania for a week, and I'm going to talk about that at some later point. And I was with a group of 16 people from Europe and India, and we were together for 5 or 6 days. There was not one moment of drama between us. Everyone was so kind and so compassionate and so awake and alert that it gave me great hope, that here we were from all over, and yet we lived together for 6 days, and everybody, there was not one wheel going off the rails, where it's like, oh, I wish that person would go away, or, it was always moving together. So I think that we're always sending out ripples of love and or separation, and to be conscious of what it is that we're doing. Because remember, as we sang early on, that you are the heart, you are the hands, you are the voice of Spirit on earth. And when I look at this whole picture, and I think like, okay, so back to the idea of the spark on wood, right? I think the spark of racism, of hate, of separation, that spark is falling on wet wood. I really do. I think it's going out. And I think the spark of love and kindness and compassion is falling on dry kindling, which will boom, go. And so it's just when I look again at Denmark and go, okay, so how did you guys go from here to here? And granted, a lot of stuff had to happen, but the consciousness had to be there before it could manifest. I believe that the consciousness is here. The consciousness is in the majority. The consciousness is on this planet. I see it all over the place, and that kindling just needs that spark. And you are the spark. You are the voice. Again, you are the heart. You are the mind of Spirit on earth. So go light the world on fire for love.